Juan Castro stood at the top of the ridge overlooking the colony at Malibu. In the darkness, he could see a few homes lit by candlelight and battery-operated lanterns. Flashlights added a Hollywood premiere vibe as the beams of light danced around the neighborhood. But his favorite visual effect was the muzzle flashes provided by his men as they indiscriminately shot and killed anyone who tried to stop their rampage. As previously planned with his brother, Juan was to take the next step to ensure their success. By this point in the attack, he and his brother agreed that any armed residents might try to take a stand against the gang as they entered the homes. If there were more than the 4 armed guards at the entry gate, who were most assuredly dead by this point, they might try to take a stand against the Castro brothers' crew. It was time to provide any remaining guards or brave residents another potentially deadlier threat than the wrath of his men. Juan wasn't a weather forecaster, but he was very observant. He had been studying the conditions along the Pacific Coast Highway for months as the teams of home invaders wreaked havoc on the usually quiet neighborhoods. He'd noticed how the winds from the Pacific often died down during the evening hours. When they did, mountain breezes from the north moved in to fill the void. On this evening, the timing couldn't have been better. The wind was blowing harder now, causing his loose-fitting shirt to flap around his waist. It picked up speed as it flowed down the mountains, across the canyons, and over the ridges overlooking the beaches. In the distance, north of Malibu, communities like Thousand Oaks, Agora Hills, and Calabasas had experienced flash fires caused by the explosion of transformers or set by people like Juan. He breathed in the brown air as it swooped down the ridge. The faint whiff of charcoal musk in the air, thick with tiny embers that glowed like a dying lightning bug before they hit the ground, aroused his senses. Juan was a firebug, a torch, a pyromaniac. There were many terms for people like him who were obsessed with setting fires. Arsonists come in many forms. Some were borderline insane, like Juan. When he proposed burning the neighborhood from the top to the bottom as a distraction, Julian had cautioned him to wait long enough for their people to strip the properties of their valuables. The two agreed on an hour and a half. Juan had been studying his watch, waiting for the appointed time. He had his men in place at the back of 6 homes that were located at the top of the ridge or immediately below them. Each of them had been provided a 5-gallon can of gasoline. They were to break windows to splash gas inside or douse the exteriors of the wood-clad homes. Then they were to wait for Juan to give them the green light. In order to signal them, Juan had brought along a flare gun. He would consider it apropos if he knew what the word meant. In his mind, shooting the bright orange flare into the sky would give him the feeling of lighting each of the Molotov cocktails himself. With a sly grin, he withdrew the safety pin. He stretched his arm high into the air, pointing the flare gun toward the heavens. He struck a pose for a moment as if he were preparing to kick off a ceremony or celebration or race. After he depressed the trigger to launch the aerial rocket, he let out a whoop and pumped his arm into the air even further. The flare sailed skyward and gradually burned itself out a few seconds later. "Burn! Burn!" he shouted to his arsonist operatives. Then, in unison, the detonations caused by the Molotov cocktails colliding with the gasoline began. At each of the homes, windows were obliterated. Trees burst into flames. Wood siding caught fire, spewing embers around the homes. Within minutes, the properties began to burn, some faster than others. Juan danced, a chaotic, primal dance without any discernible rhythm. It was his way of celebrating the fire. He reveled in the destruction. The stench of the acrid smoke found its way to his nostrils. He loved the fire. And then he became oddly morose, almost angry. He stared at the homes that had been set ablaze. His voice was deep, guttural as he spoke, slowly marching down the street as homes burned on each side of him. "We will take what is ours with fire and the blood of our brothers,"